Nice
Hello.
to meet you here.
Good to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. Beautiful day in Southern California. How are you doing?
Oh, it's a rainy day in Berlin, but still, it's good. It's nature, and as long as it's a good thing for the environment, I think I'm happy. So, as we were talking before in the backstage, I think it's a good thing that it's raining right now, so I shouldn't complain. And I'm glad that you are here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time and spend the next 30 minutes talking about you, talking about SunEarth, talking about solar thermal in the US. This is the first interview that I do with someone on the other side of the Atlantic. So I'm very, very happy. And so welcome you again to the Heat Changers community.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Should be great.
Yeah, sure. So let's start. Let's start. And before I introduce yourself, I think it's better if you introduce yourself and you tell us who you are, who's Adam, and what does he do?
Sure. So I'm Adam Chrisman. So I'm the president of SunEarth. So SunEarth is a manufacturer of solar thermal equipment in Southern California. We've been around for quite a while. It was founded in 1978 and always been in California as a manufacturer. So myself, I started with the company as a applications engineer. So I'm a mechanical engineer by background. Um, and slowly but surely fell more and more in love with the technology and different things. And fortunately enough, now run the whole company. And so I'm in charge of both kind of operationally and get to work really closely to do designs and other sort of things that really get my juices flowing. So,
Great. So you are that's part of your life, being at a company working on engineering stuff, I guess.
yeah, I mean, so I've always been a very technical person. You know, as a kid, a lot of engineers have the stories of taking things apart just to try to figure them out, to put them back together. So I've always had that through my whole life. My wife likes to say that I can break things to a whole new level, but then eventually then I fix them. And so that's kind of carried me through. You know, I'm a really hands-on person, and so being at the factory level where we can create things as well as supporting technology and educating kind of tickles all my buttons, I guess to say. So originally, you know, I didn't come to solar directly from university or from college. I was a gearhead. I was a car guy, and so you know, through college I worked as an auto mechanic, and so I always thought afterwards I would go into the automotive industry, and I did. And so I was very fortunate to get with an engineering company where we were building battery electric vehicles. You know, kind of customer based. It wasn't a big automaker, but it kind of electrify anything, right? And so now we're an electrify everything. You know, time and space as far as the world goes now. But this was electrify anything in regards to a vehicle. So got to work on some very cool projects. You make very big trucks and very small, like 1 or 2 person, you know, vehicles, and I really enjoyed it for a long time. Then not pandemic, the kind of the first financial crisis hit, and so a lot of that kind of work dried up, and that's how I found myself looking for kind of the next challenge. I did diesel emission equipment, you know, which I found interesting. I got to say, I'm not an environmentalist, which is kind of interesting for someone running a solar company. But
Yeah.
I am very deeply rooted in efficiency. Like I really want things to be as efficient as possible. I think that's the best way to take advantage of whatever resource we have. And so that's kind of my driving force. And so through that, emissions filters didn't really, you know, make me too happy. You know, I think it did a good job and we had a great product, but found solar thermal, and you know, wasn't very familiar with it. Even all through college, I felt very bad. I didn't know anything about it.
Uh-huh.
But fortunately enough, you know, the founder of our company saw something in me that I could take things apart and put them back together, and figured to give me a shot trying to learn about solar thermal in order to help our customers design better systems.
So how was that first encounter? When I first joined the industry. It was in 2008. I didn't really know I was becoming part of the solar thermal industry. I just knew I was becoming part of the solar industry. And I didn't even know that there was a PV and a solar thermal one. I just knew solar. I had no background at all. So for me, the first thing I learned was solar thermal. A couple of months later, perhaps during my training, I realized, because someone explained me, there is also this PV part. So for me, it was like a whole new discovery, both of them. How was it for you? You have a different background. For sure, you may have some more idea of what was solar thermal. But how was this first time you heard
Yeah,
it?
I guess, I had not had any experience with solar PV, but I understand that it existed. And, we're in California, so, you kind of see it around. This was, kind of the late 2010, 2009. And so, I had a little bit of understanding of how those systems work. There's not much solar thermal in California, unfortunately. There was a lot, but it was pretty aged. So, but there was a renewed interest right around the time I started with SunEarth. And so one of the great things for my benefit was that SunEarth is part of a larger corporation which has different parts, all kind of related to efficiency and energy. And one of those parts is based in Hawaii, where they do a lot of solar distribution. So they sell a lot of solar equipment. And so I was exposed to PV and batteries and inverters, along with a solar thermal education pretty early on. I think I am more drawn to solar thermal. I think I find it, maybe it's the mechanical background, but a little more interesting. You can do a little more flexibility of things. There's it's been around a very long time, and so you can really dig in to all the applications of it. And I think PV is a great technology, and I think all renewables can work together. There's never the singular answer to a problem, right? And I think energy is a big problem for both the United States, for California, for the world, and for our future. And so, really having as broad a view as possible can lead to great things being uncovered. And so, I would say I'm better educated in solar thermal because that's the company that I work for directly. But really what made me the most interested in it was when I started learning about different solar technologies, renewable in general. We did some wind stuff and different things like that. And then I saw the efficiency of the equipment, right? So, and solar thermal in my mind is still untouched, and it's like multiple avenues of efficiency, right? You have efficiency in what it takes to drive the system to get energy out, but you also have efficiency of the resource that you're using, right? Energy doesn't come from nowhere. And so, you need to be able to harness it and capture it and then convert it as efficiently as possible from the very get-go. And solar thermal is great for that. So that's really why I stuck with it and started to explore more and more, the nuances, right? I think for a long time, solar thermal, well, it's been around, but in the United States, which is most of my experience, we had kind of a renaissance in the 70s with the oil embargo and different things like that. And there was a whole lot of solar thermal that went into the country for around a decade or so, and then it kind of flatlined dropped off dramatically, and then, scraped along, right? And there are a lot of very good people doing a lot of really hard work in the industry to keep it going until that kind of next renaissance where we saw energy prices start to increase again and a resurgence in renewables and solar thermal. And that's around the time I came around. So I was pretty lucky.
Nice. I'm glad that people like you join the industry. Many of the colleagues that I have, or friends or just business partners in this industry, come from that part, like from mechanical engineering. Some of them, of course, more recently have had the background of renewable energy, master's degree or whatever. I think right now there is a little bit more of awareness on the education part. However, I always say it's important that many other people from many other areas join this industry, because there is room for everyone, and it's an industry. So we need a little bit of every type of education. and especially also young people. And I'm very happy that there are always visionaries joining this industry, because it's a renaissance. Of course, we develop still a lot of things, so it's been there for a long time, but there is still a lot of things to do, a lot of things to work on. I think there is a lot of room for innovation. And since you have mentioned the word efficiency several times, I'd like just to know what is your take on innovation in this industry? I think there is still a lot to discover, a lot to apply at certain areas. Is there something that is more interesting for you, where you would say, I'd like to develop this, or maybe we should work on that, like
I
specific application?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start with that. I agree. I think solar thermal like is taken very broadly, and its applications are there's a myriad of applications for it, but it's really been kind of hit with a one big hammer approach for the most part over decades. It's that we have one product, it could fit there, and it could fit there, and it could fit there, it could fit there, and we'll stretch it to fit there. And I think that's been where a challenge for the industry as a whole, always trying to make that peg fit, just because it could. And so as I look to the future, I see a lot of opportunity in more individualistic or smaller application designs, right? A product designed specifically for this application to be integrated for this application, right? When we talk solar thermal, generally talking about a systematic approach. It's usually not a product approach, right? If you talk, a water heater, it's usually a product approach. But when we look at solar thermal, because we need to have some equipment outside and then some equipment inside, it becomes more systematic. And so we focused a lot on kind of products, but not enough on how to quickly and efficiently integrate those systems, right, into homes, into buildings, into businesses, even industrial applications. And I think there's a lot of growth opportunity in that. It puts people to work, which is great, out in the field, and usually get to spend some nice time outside installing these systems. But I think as a manufacturer and as an industry perspective, looking to more specialize our solutions is a great opportunity. And so from kind of my perspective, I see larger volumes domestic hot water have been a kind of a market that has been popular for solar thermal, right? Especially the kind of the medium temperature solar thermal that SunEarth generally works with. But have been more systematic approaches, right? Engineers design because it's great and it's interesting equipment and technology, and so you get to really dig in and design a system very specifically for that building.
Yeah.
But it uses a lot of resource, and given education isn't where I would like to see it in solar thermal, it can lead to a lot of mistakes, right? I like to view solar thermal as it dies quietly or it doesn't work quietly, because generally it's not the primary system. And so, if things go wrong, it's not really noticeable very quickly. A lot of times historically, it's getting better. We have monitoring on most of these systems now, and we're able to see when things aren't working. But if we're able to pull some of that more into an industrial standardization type of space, and have specific products designed around that, to not make it boilerplate 100%, but more boilerplate for young engineers and people getting into the business to understand quicker and not have to know the entire world of solar thermal before they can do their first solar thermal project, is where I think a great opportunity lies, and where SunEarth has spent a little bit of time trying to develop more.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I also say solar thermal is all about, well, especially in commercial and industrial applications, it's like a tailor-made solution, because every client is different, despite the industries may be very similar in terms of their processes and the way they work and the way they produce goods or products. Still, every system is designed according to the needs of the client. And I guess for engineers, that should be like, wow, like I need to think, I need to find out the way to get the client as much energy as they need under certain circumstances. I guess it's like kind of also problem solving issue every system. So I wonder, in your day to day, how's one of your days? Like you spend a lot of time in the office, or I don't know if you have a sort of lab, or you go to the field, or you visit clients. How's your day, and what's a part of your job that you enjoy the most?
Sure. So, I mean, I primarily working at the factory most days. I travel a bit for different industry events or to see customers, but majority of the time I get to be at the factory. So, my day always starts how I want it to start, which is generally being able to walk the factory floor and see all everybody at SunEarth working hard in order to bring renewable energy products to the masses, right? So one thing about SunEarth is we are an employee-owned company. So there's everybody that's working with us is working for their own benefit as much as anybody else's benefit, which is really great. And so I really enjoy, even though I've seen the process thousands, if not millions of times by now, watching these products go from very raw materials of copper and aluminum and flat pieces of metal to a finished product, that is going to save somebody money and help families and businesses really secure themselves to the future of their energy needs. And so I love that every day. Then come back to the office and do office things, right? Go through emails, answer any questions with customers, work with the sales teams on any projects that they happen to have in process and need a little bit of my help with. I'm still kind of the main technical source in the company. And so, I still get to dig in and look at plan sets and try to identify with our sales teams the best way to integrate a solar thermal system into a design, right? And, so that sort of engineer side of me, I get that juice from it. Fortunately enough, I guess I don't work in the engineering world anymore. So that time constraint that is usually on designers, that they would love to dig in and love to figure it out and really, embrace their design and their curiosity, they just don't get the time. So I'm fortunate I get a little more time to do that because I'm doing it more in an educational way than some designers do. And so, usually ends up being conference calls, different vendors, trying to figure, luckily supply chain isn't as bad as it once was a few years ago. So there's a lot less of that. And then hopefully, every now and then we do have we call it an experiment room. We have about, 2,000 gallons worth of hot water at SunEarth in our experiment room in order to cool and heat. And, I have half a dozen to a dozen different arrays going up on the roof to try different product solutions. So usually end up in there, on Friday evenings or afternoons before I go home.
Nice.
In order to keep working and, verify stuff. So
That sounds like fun. I like that Friday thing.
yeah. You got to go to the weekend smiling, right?
Of course. It's like closing the week,
Yeah.
fun activity. Not that the others are not so much fun, but let's see, there is one favorite, right? It's always one. Great. You were mentioning talking to the colleagues, discussing some issues. I was also wondering, how is the interaction between the rather creative communication team, I would say, people working on marketing or PR or graphic design? We were also discussing in the backstage that a lot of the things that happen in solar thermal are very technical. Still, as in any other industry, you need to communicate that in a simpler way for multiple audiences, right? So how do you build that bridge? How is that communication in the company? How do you guys get along combining different departments' experience?
Yeah, I would say that might be one of our greatest challenges. And so that's why I really appreciate everything that Heat Changers is doing, because I think it is kind of trying to bridge that gap. I because solar thermal is so technically forward and I'm an engineer by background, I tend to push that. I really want you to understand the technology. and then try to be creative about it. But then, you know, it's come back, well, no, it's very simple, right? We're trying to talk to humans, not to engineers, really. And so, you
Yes.
know, how can we do that with a little more flash and a little more, you know, graphic and a little more simplification? And so I really always try to remember when I first started in solar thermal, again, I didn't know much about it. And there was a general manager at the time, there was also an engineer, and he was giving a talk. And so the first talk, technical talk that I got to see was to a group of engineers. And the first slide was discussing different solar technologies and how they work. And started with PV and talked about, you know, the actually very technical way that PV works that most people, I would say, even in the solar business, don't really understand. They just understand that the solar hits the panel, it makes electricity, but it's a very complicated scenario. And then then he touched on solar thermal, and he made solar thermal very simple. And it essentially was that if you put black pipe in the sun, it gets hot, and that's it. Yes, it could be very technical, but it can be very that simple. And everybody has grown up with that experience, right? You know, fortunately, you know, I grew up still being able to run around, and we had a good yard. And so you would always get hot in California. You turn on the hose in order to try to cool off, but it had been sitting in the sun, and it spread hot water, you know, right when you were trying to cool down, right? A lot of people have been through that. And so I think breaking it down to that level and, you know, is the challenge in discussion with marketing. You know, and so I think we're doing a good job. I think it can still be much better. And I think, you know, really how we've found the most success is with smaller videos about the technology versus what used to be, you know, webinars or very complex, you know, like pages on websites and different things like that.
Yeah, I also believe that we need to adapt to what people now are used to consume and how, in which formats, right? Perhaps before we would be more used to reading books or reading magazines or having like more dense stock of information. And now, since we have access to plenty of information out there through internet and through all different types of applications, our attention span is, of course, very, very short. So now we need to get the message, that very first contact, that very first message right in people's mind and keep their attention. And then, of course, if we manage to get their attention, then we can explain a little bit more. I guess that depending on the target group, like if you're talking to someone in the industry, it's different than if you talk to someone developing a housing project, right? So for that, I believe that these teamwork between technical teams and marketing or creative teams is always very, very important. It's crucial to have a communication and to exchange point of views of how to get the message to the target in the proper way so that we are not too technical, not too superficial, and get the message through, which is actually what we need to do, right? So
Absolutely.
that was great. And you mentioned before how much there room there is still there to innovate, to develop ideas, to develop things. I like to give always a message to people who are perhaps in an early stage of their careers, and they may consider, like you at the time, which industry to join. What would you tell younger generations about solar thermal, about your company, about the products, so that they may get motivated and join us in a certain way?
Sure. I would tell them that, you know, as we kind of discussed, there's a whole range of opportunities in order to still improve the technology, even though it's been around for, you know, over a century, and feel like if something's been around for over a century, it's old, right? It's optimized to its top potential, or it wasn't meant to be if it hasn't really become a household name by now. And so I would say that's definitely not true, right? You know, it's solar thermal is not old solar. Really, it's been a proven technology for a very long time, and it's really just the appetite for it that hasn't led to its commercial success as large as maybe some other renewables that you might find interesting. And added to that, my view of really trying to do best by the world and leverage your time, you need to do it the most efficient way possible. And the efficiency of solar thermal technologies really is untouched, right? In whether you want to talk COP or you want to talk per square foot or per square meter of space taken up, right? We only have so much of a world, and most of the people in that world, as you know, living in Berlin, are close together. And so if we're going to harness those naturally occurring energy sources, we got to do it very efficiently with the space that we have, right? Housing is already a problem in most of the world, right? And so we can't necessarily, where the people are, take up a lot of space to meet these energy needs. And solar thermal is great at that, right? And really the integration of it into all different market segments is really in its infancy, I would say, in that regard, right? Solar thermal's mainly been driven by manufacturers of the panel, and integrators that love the project view of it. And so there's a whole lot between what's on the roof and the drafting table, in which people can add value, can really create business, and feed both creative juices and business juices at the same. And so I'm very excited about solar thermal. I really believe that the time has come where the advantages of the technology are needed, and recognized to be needed. And so there'll be a lot of opportunity to participate in really changing the future around heat, right? I love the name heat changers because it's really been ignored. Heat as an energy consumer is really untouched, because it was just so easy to burn things, I guess. And so,
Yeah, like we take it for granted, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, you
yeah,
don't even think about it. I think that's the real issue. And somehow we're more related to light,
yeah,
and to electricity, but heat is like, no, no, no. I used to say it's because it's more important to have that other basic need of having it warm, like
yeah,
wherever you are, like to exist, you need it first, perhaps fire
yeah.
than power, so
Well,
that we just forgot about it.
I would imagine, our ancestors, when fire was first discovered, it was for warmth, not for light. And so,
Exactly.
you have to take care of that basic need. And we've been very fortunate as a civilization to not have to worry about heat so much for the most part. There's still challenges around the world, but it is one of those necessities that's kind of been met, and so it fell off as far as a priority. But you know, having it reprioritized is really opening up all the opportunity and the lack of development that's been done in the heat space for decades, because we can just add more capacity. It was very easy to add heat capacity historically, right? All you had to do was pay for the fuel. You never pay for the capacity, right? And now that fuel is not what we're worried about, now we are worried, more looking at the capacity costs. And there are a lot of opportunities for improvement in that.
Yes, and emissions reductions, right? I think many people just wonder, or and maybe they just don't really believe that you can have exactly the same type of energy, even a cleaner energy, of course, with solar thermal. That like the water can get so hot with these things. Yes, of course it can. I mean, that's the technological view, right? Like it's not just the hot water that you need at home, that you don't need more than 30 degrees Celsius. You can also get like for industrial applications, right, where you can get boiling water
Absolutely.
from a solar thermal collector. And I think that's a point where when I talk to people who are not from the industry, where they say, oh really, oh that's interesting, tell me more about it. So I
Mhm.
hope you have these type of experiences as well with your clients, with the people you talk to, with the leads, and that you do more businesses, and that you manage to really convince everyone from the commercial, from the industrial sector. We learned that a lot with the interview with Will in the podcast that we just published recently. So I was very happy to learn today more about you, about your company, about what you do. And I invite everyone to listen to the podcast and also to review this interview with you. And I don't know if you have one final message for our audience. We have 1 more minute left.
Not a final message. I really appreciate this time. I'm really encouraged about the future and the possibility there's for young people to get into renewable energy business and the renewable heat business, right? I guess my final message, because I'm an engineer, is always technical. And so, to your point earlier, heat can come in all different ranges, right? And as an engineer, you always think about heat as forms of temperature. And temperature and heat are very different things, and all engineers understand that. And so really being able to provide heat doesn't mean you have to provide temperature, right? And learning more about energy and embracing the different ways that we can meet these challenges of the future, I'm really excited for it, and I'm excited to work more with colleagues and continue to work with young people in order to introduce them to the technology.
Excellent, great message. Thank you very much, Adam. It's been a pleasure talking to you the last 30 minutes. They go always very quick. And looking forward to learning more about you, your company. I will be following every single step you do, and hopefully we manage to do more things together. Have a
Thank you.
great day.
You too.
And good luck. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Ciao.